Grab your desert wear, Wargamers, because today we're taking the joy of Wargaming's table in a bold new terrain direction. I put together a single box, and to give you an idea, all of this terrain, we got a lovely oasis, we've got some sand dunes, a camp, some rocks, some towers, or some posts, columns, stele, whatever you want to call them, and a couple of small pyramids that will all condense down into one little box like this. The only thing that won't fit is the drop box. The tent is from Gamecraft Minis. The fire is from Pendraken. It's actually from their 10mm line. It's a little on the small side, as you can see. For those of you that aren't aware, this is my scale figure. I like to use him to show how big this stuff is. His name is Chicken Joe. He's an alternative armies figure. And, I don't know, you can hear from the outside. I just like chickens, okay? Anyway, he stands about 15mm tall. The columns and this guy came in a package for about $12, $13. Bought it on Etsy. It also came with this wonderful little printed sarcophagus with a little pharaoh on the inside. And then 3 of these large canopic jars. Now these canopic jars, I think, are just a little bit too big for my, a little bit too big for my 15mm boys. As you can see, they stand pretty tall when compared to him. So I'm not going to be using these. I'll send them to a friend of mine that games in a much bigger scale, and he can add them to his lead mountain. They're a resin printed material. I think when you take a look at this piece here, you can kind of see those horizontal striations. They really come out in this figure. I think it looks fine. It looks like the striations in a sandstone, makes the thing look weathered, and it paints up just fine. So we're good on that. A couple of things I want to show you. I was a little nervous in my last video about whether or not these sand dunes would work, and I'm happy to inform you that they do. Let me bring the camera down for a little closer view and I'll show you. I think this will also give you a little better idea of the scale of these things. So I was afraid that this was going to be a little too steep. I know that I tested the figures before I put the material on and they slid right off. Now this is just a piece of plastic that I found at a safety supply store. You glue this to the road and it serves as a bump, so people have a warning, not full speed bump, and it's bright white. I sprayed this with a matte dull coat so that the glue and sand would stick a little better. And now I'm happy to inform you that after full painting, old Chicken Joe has a nice, lovely little hill he can climb on. Sometimes right down here at the very bottom, depending on the figure, if he's a little bit top heavy, he's not going to stand up. So we may need to just nudge him up a little bit more. But, you know, it worked out great. I kind of took a leap of faith and it worked fantastic. The grippiness of this really works to help keep your figures on top. So not only do they block line of sight, but they are difficult ground. And if you're playing a game that has rules for whether, when you're doing melee, whether you're higher or lower than the next guy, that will definitely come into play. We're going to take a walk over here to these rocks next. And we'll bring Chicken Joe along for the ride. So all of the rocks that you see here are rocks that I found in the garden. Natural materials are your friend. It's got a great rocky texture. You can see it's kind of brownish on the bottom. I used a brown base coat and then just dry brushed up through black and various shades of gray. It provides perfect hard cover for your 15mm figures, and it's just mounted on a standard washer. It's actually a bit of a fender washer, but it looks fantastic, and I think this is probably a good time to slide on over to the dune so you can get an idea for how tall that dune is. And I'm not sure. I don't think it completely blocks the line of sight. We may declare that it does, that it's higher in reality, it's higher in game terms than it is in physical terms. But you can see that just kind of eyeballing it, the terrain is a slightly different color from the mat. Some people will consider that a negative. I consider that a positive. It helps to illustrate where open ground is, no special rules need apply, and rough ground is. And of course, you can change that when it comes to things like these towering palm trees. And to give you an idea of scale, we'll stick old Chicken Joe there in the shadows. And we pan up, and we'll come back down. The vegetation here is just pulled from extra trees that I had. This is from an old aquarium plant, and then I went ahead and, let's see if I can find one. I know, there we go. So we'll spin this around so you can see a little better. This is just your standard clump foliage that I put in there to make it, to hide a couple of gaps actually, and also to add a little bit more green to the bottom and a little bit more variety to the plants. Remember that God in His infinite wisdom has given us a profusion of plants, and as we prepare our basic emulations of His wondrous creation, it's in our own best interest to follow suit and use a wide selection of plants as well. I think that little bit of different green adds a little bit of variety, makes it just a little bit sharper. And then we're going to pull over our, I don't know about this well. Obviously, it's just a series of washers, but when you view it from up high, it clearly looks like the well of an oasis. I painted, it's a little pale blue. I don't think it's showing up so great in this light, but I painted some blue tiles there to show that this was once a thriving area. This was a manufactured oasis that they took advantage of the well. There's a little bit of blue down at the bottom of the well as well. There is also a little bit of blue at the bottom of the well. Oh, that's a much better sentence. And, you know, it just gives it that sense of scale from a temporal perspective. It just ages the place out and lets you know that it's a bit ruined. And I think it just, also, purely from an aesthetic perspective, that little bit of white, that little bit of blue, a little bit of yellow and orange, excuse me, there's a lot of bit of yellow on this table, that little splash of red and this white, using gray columns is probably not historically accurate. That's all right. It all helps add a little bit of visual flair to what would otherwise be nothing but a big plane of yellow with a little bit of brown and green in it. And I think it just breaks everything up. And really, when you play a miniature war game like this, your little dudes, Chicken Joe is going to be running around this for an hour or so. And it's in your own best interest as a wargamer to try to make the table that you're looking at as good looking as possible. Things that are beautiful are a lot more fun to be around. So while a huge thrust of the hobby these days seems to be towards making things ugly, you know, making them really industrial and gloppy and gloomy and dark and grim, you know, the real world is grim enough. It doesn't need my help. So when I build a table, I really like to make it as aesthetically pleasing as possible. Bright poppin' colors. Yeah, there's conflict going on, but that doesn't mean we have to be miserable, does it? I don't think so. So that's the terrain in a nutshell. You know, it's a full, this is actually, grab my ruler so I can demonstrate. This drop cloth that you're looking at is 2 feet across by 3 feet across, a little bit bigger than I usually use. You can see that it, wow, it just so happens to fit my kitchen island. It's actually a peninsula because of the wall, but you get the idea. Wow, it's almost like that was done on purpose. It totally was. In fact, everything you see here was done on purpose, including I wanted some big terrain, these nice big leafy green trees, but I was a little concerned about how to make it fit into a box this size. So what I did is I strategized. Hey, I'm a miniature wargamer. That's what I do. And I thought, all right, well, before I buy these columns, I better think ahead, and I better make sure that they, let's see if we can see through. Oh yeah, look. They'll fit. I knew that when I bought them. I took the time to prepare my logistics. What about this big boy? He's never going to fit, is he? See, oh, he's just way too tall. Well, hold your horses there, buddy. Because I cut this base. We'll flip around the other side so that sticker's not in the way. I cut that base specifically to fit. And here you can see the pegs at the base of these trees that I bought to give it a little more stability. I cut that specifically to fit so that I could have a little bit of taller terrain. Always thinking, always using your head. This is not a hobby for everyone. In fact, not everyone is welcome at my table. There's a lot of talk about how we need to welcome everyone. No. We need to welcome everyone who's capable and interested in this hobby, not just everyone off the streets. If you've ever seen what's the movie with the mouse and the cook where he says, look, the point is not that literally every single one of the 7 billion people on this planet can be a wargamer. They can't. They don't have the constitution for it. They don't have the intellectual firepower for it. They don't have the motivation, the drive. The point is not that anyone can do it. The point is that a wargamer can come from anywhere. And if you're the kind of person that enjoys this level of forethought and planning, if you're the kind of person that is hands-on and wants a unique table that is all his own, you're welcome at my table anytime. But it's a total package, right? If you're not interested in rolling dice, hit the bricks. I ain't got time for you. So anyway, let me show you. Things are gonna get quiet here because what I'm gonna do is show you in real time how all of this squeezes into this little box. And I'll speed the video up to make it a little more obvious. You gotta think about how you're putting this stuff in because it's all self-supporting, and of course your taller ones gots to go first, and then we gotta squeeze it all in. But the thing that I like is all of this green foliage here is actually gonna help cushion the blows for the rest of the terrain. And of course, these are just short enough that they'll fit. The terrain fits into a small tub, and this can go into my general box of terrain. And here you can see my big one box. I've got a couple of boxes of trees in there for my greenish, more western terrain. And then as I spin this around to the other side, you can see this big fat circle there is the box of my desert terrain. Fits nice and tidy. You can see the base of one of my trees for the desert terrain, and I even have room left over for my War in the Vendée and my Three Musketeers figures. It all fits nice and neat with a drop cloth. So there you go. You got the one big box to rule them all. One big box to drool them all. I do have another one of the desert-sized boxes. That size, that includes all of my fantasy structures. So it's not quite one box, but we're getting there. And who knows, maybe if I can find a smarter way to do this, I can condense it all into this. But this is just my way of showing you, you don't need a whole lot of space to be a wargamer. You can wargame in small spaces. With a little bit of creativity, you can have a lot of variation in your terrain, and it doesn't have to break the bank, and it doesn't have to clutter up the entire house. If you got room for a box like this, you got room for a full war game. That's all you need. So when I'm in the mood for something a little drier than a standard Western European fantasy land, I now have options. And options are your friend. Great colors, great terrain, not terribly expensive. Painted it all in about 2 sessions, a total of about 6 hours of painting, total of about 4 hours of construction, and countless hours of shopping online, which is all part of the fun and part of the joy of wargaming. Until next time, I'm praying for you.